We are approaching the release of Aglaea in Honkai Star Rail, and she's going to be our very first limited 5-star Remembrance character. This is a pretty big deal since she is looking to be a very unique and really strong lightning DPS character. So today, we're going to go over her full kit and talk about her overall value to see whether or not you should pull for Aglaea on your account. So starting with her basic attack, it is just going to damage one enemy. It's not anything crazy for a basic attack. But her skill is, while it's important, it's not really something that you're going to invest in too much because it is just fully based on not only keeping the Garment Maker on the field, but getting them onto the field in the first place. So if the Garment Maker Memo Sprite is not on the field, it is going to be summoned upon using Aglaea's skill, and it's going to immediately take action. Plus, if the Garment Maker is already on the field, it is going to be healed for half its health at max trace level, which is good to keep the Garment Maker alive to prepare for its build-up, which we're going to get to that once we get to its Memo Sprite talent. But first, to go over Aglaea's talent, we do get some insight on two of the stats that Garment Maker actually bases upon Aglaea's stats, which is going to be firstly its speed. So Garment Maker's speed is going to be 35% of what Aglaea's speed is, and Garment Maker's HP is going to be at a percentage of Aglaea's max HP plus an additional flat amount as well. And whenever Garment Maker's on the field, Aglaea's attacks are going to be able to inflict the Seam Stitch state on any enemy she hits. And whenever attacking enemies with Seam Stitch, they are going to take an additional amount of lightning damage. And you can only have Seam Stitch on a single enemy, so it's not something you can just trigger left and right. You will have it just on one enemy, so you definitely want to mark the elite or boss enemy that you're fighting. So now that we have that baseline for the Garment Maker, let's talk about the Memo Sprite skill and talent here to show how they really work. So the Memo Sprite skill will automatically be used upon the Garment Maker's turn coming up, and it is a blast damage attack. Now for the Memo Sprite talent, it is split into three main parts, so we'll talk about each of them here. The first and most important one probably is a Body Brewed by Tears, which will give the Garment Maker a speed increasing stack whenever attacking an enemy with Seam Stitch. Each of these stacks will increase the Garment Maker's speed by 55, and these stacks can go up to 6 times. So you can get a very strong speed boost from playing into this Memo Sprite talent just from the Garment Maker attacking. And anytime Garment Maker will attack with the Memo Sprite skill, it's going to actually prioritize enemies that have Seam Stitch so that you can get these stacks more reliably. The next part of the Memo Sprite talent is the Speeding Summer, which will give the Garment Maker a 100% action advance anytime it's summoned, which just means a pretty quick attack right when you get a Garment Maker on the field, which is also very nice to build up those stacks. Then lastly, the Bloom of Drying Grass section will give Aglaea 20 energy anytime Garment Maker goes off of the field, which is a nice way to just get a bit more energy for her really expensive ultimate, which we're going to actually talk about right now. So upon using her ultimate, it is going to summon the Garment Maker if they are not on the field, but if they are going to be healed to full HP. And upon using the ultimate, rather than it being an attack, Aglaea is going to enter the Supreme Stance and will also get a 100% action advance. So during the Supreme Stance state, Aglaea is going to gain the same speed boost stacks that the Garment Maker has, but instead of the flat rate boost that the Garment Maker gets, Aglaea is going to get a 15% speed bonus per stack, which you might be wondering why we're stacking up so much speed, but once we get to her traces, you're going to see why. Also in the Supreme Stance, Aglaea's basic attack will be enhanced, and during this time you can't use her skill as well. And with the Supreme Stance state, the Garment Maker is also immune to crowd control, making it a lot more consistent. You don't have to worry about those kind of debuffs to ruin the flow of your rotations. And this Supreme Stance has a countdown on the action order that is at 100 base speed. And this is very similar to Firefly's countdown for her ultimate, so that once the countdown reaches the top of the action order, the state will end. And upon the Supreme Stance ending, the Garment Maker will actually self-destruct and be removed from the field. And if you're able to get Aglaea's ult up again while Supreme Stance is still active, you're going to be able to reset the countdown, which just gives you even more uptime on that really strong enhanced basic attack. Which, speaking of which, the enhanced basic attack is a joint attack between Aglaea and the Garment Maker. It is a blast damage attack, which is very nice, but it also does not recover skill points. So you won't be able to get any skill points back with it like a normal basic attack does. Then for Aglaea's technique, you're going to be able to summon the Garment Maker and do an attack on all enemies. Aglaea will also regenerate 30 energy, and you'll be able to inflict Seam Stitch on a random enemy to start those speed stacks up as quickly as possible. So that is it for the base kit, so now let's go into Aglaea's traces here. Starting with her A2 trace, which is probably the most important one here. So both Aglaea and the Garment Maker, while they're in the Supreme Stance state, they're going to get an attack buff based on Aglaea's speed and also Garment Maker's speed, and a pretty generous amount of each as well. So you're going to see some pretty crazy damage increases from them, especially if you have all of the Garment Maker's speed stacks built up from hitting enemies with Seam Stitch. Then the A4 trace allows the Garment Maker to retain one of his speed stacks once the Garment Maker disappears from the field, and upon being resummoned, the Garment Maker will immediately gain one of those stacks back. Then for the A6 traits, if Aglaea starts battle at less than half of her energy, she's going to regain enough energy to be at 50%, which is pretty good because of how expensive her ultimate cost is. Then lastly for traces, her stat traces, she gets 12% crit rate, 22.4% lightning damage, and 12.5% defense. Then to quickly go over her Eidolons as well, for players who may want to put a bit more investment in her. So her E1 will deal 15% increased damage to the enemy that has Seam Stitch, and will also regenerate 20 energy for Aglaea whenever attacking the enemy with Seam Stitch, which is really good to get her ultimate up more consistently and to keep Supreme Stance up as much as possible. Then her E2 will allow both Aglaea and the Garment Maker to ignore 14% of the enemy's defense, and this can stack up to 3 times, and the stacks will reset when any other ally takes an action. And from the wording, this doesn't include like automatic actions, so like something like Loach's healing, for example, would not reset it, I believe, but it has to be like a specific action like during the character's turn. Then for her E4, the Member Sprite speed boost stack, it will have an increased limit of +1, so you can have up to 7 stacks of the speed boost, and in addition, you can now also gain these boosts when Aglaea hits the enemies with Seam Stitch as well. So that definitely helps to get the speed stacks up a lot faster. And then finally for E6, whenever you're in the Supreme Stance state, Aglaea and Garment Maker will have a 20% lightning res pen increase to deal even more damage. And when Aglaea or the Garment Maker have certain speed thresholds, they're going to get additional damage on their enhanced basic attack, with the highest amount of increase being at 60%. So you're going to be able to do some really strong damage with that E6 there for sure, but all of her Eidolons honestly are very good to improve her damage overall. So that is everything for Aglaea's kit. So now, let's talk about her overall value and whether or not I think you should be pulling for her. So I think overall, Aglaea is going to be a very strong DPS, and I think that she is going to be able to perform really well for a long time, but I do think that for her to truly shine, you're gonna want some of her best supports, because if Aglaea can't act multiple times in quick succession, then you're not going to be getting the most out of the speed stacks and out of just her overall damage and making the most of the Supreme Stance state, especially if you're running her at E0S0 or E0S1. So I think for Aglaea, if you don't have another strong lightning DPS, or if you're just looking for another DPS in general, I think that Aglaea can be a strong pickup, but I do think that you need to have either Sunday or Robin. If you have them both, great, because that is going to be Aglaea's best comp. I definitely do think that having one of them is good enough because of Remembrance MC, because they can also be a very strong support as well for Aglaea. So I think, yeah, if you have at least one of those two limited supports, I think Aglaea is going to be a very great pick, and you're going to have some really strong value for her, and she's going to do a lot of great damage for you. But if you're missing those supports, I don't think she's as great of a pickup. You can run some other, supports. You can run like Sparkle, Bronya, Tingyun, other characters that could still buff Aglaea. But Sunday was made for the Remembrance summon characters, and also Robin's ultimate is able to boost up the entire team, obviously. So Robin is pretty powerful. Plus she is having a banner coming up as well, which is a whole nother conversation if you don't have Robin right now. But I think if you either already have another strong lightning DPS or are good on DPS in your account, or if you are not really too focused on the summon meta, or if you're waiting for a future summon character and not really too satisfied with Aglaea, I don't think she's super necessary, because I don't think she's like a game changer, like you have to pull this character or you're like bricking your account. I think that Aglaea is going to be very strong for the people who, not only the people that pull her, but the people who pull her and have the right supports for her. Because as we've seen with the state of Honkai Star Rail, if you have the right DPSs with the right supports, you can do some good stuff for a while on your account. But if you're missing pieces of different comps, it can be a bit troublesome to get through later content. So if you already have all the pieces for Aglaea, I think she's going to be an amazing character to pick up. But if you don't have them all, and you have a plan to get them later, she can be great. But if you don't have a plan to get characters like Sunday or Robin later on, or Aglaea, then she's not going to perform as good as you might think she will. So that is everything I have about Aglaea. Let me know in the comments down below if you are planning on pulling for her. I'm still undecided because I do have all the pieces for her on my account, but I'll see how I feel for Aglaea. If I want to pull for her, maybe wait for a future Remembrance DPS, but we'll see. If you enjoyed and want to see more content from me, definitely be sure to hit that subscribe button. But with that, everyone, thank you all for watching, and I will see you all next time.